America, this is Quinn McInnes reporting on a special edition of WQNM Morning News. Today, we're at the Aspen Institute on the Wye River in Queenstown, Maryland. The reason for us being here is to teach our viewers out there about the Aspen Institute, but mostly about the Wye River Memorandum. Before we get to the really interesting parts, I'll give you some background knowledge on the Aspen Institute. In 1950, Walter Paepcke founded the Aspen Institute in Aspen, Colorado. It was used to hold peaceful talks and meetings. The state we are on right now was originally owned by William Paca, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and the third governor of Maryland. The property was then purchased in 1937 by Arthur Houghton, Jr. He turned the property into a gifted and talented camp for boys called the Wye Institute. Later on, he learned about the Aspen Institute in Colorado, and in 1979, he decided he should donate his land to become a second institute. Located on the Wye River, a tributary of the Chesapeake Bay, the Institute is a very peaceful, remote location to hold neutral meetings and talks. This is how this entire area came to be. Now to get to the reason we are here in the first place. In October of 1998, the Wye River Peace Talks and Memorandum took place on this very estate. The Wye River Peace Talks were between Palestine and Israel. Israel and Palestine have been fighting since World War II, but their religions have been fighting for even longer. Israel is a Jewish state, while Palestine has a Muslim population. Those religions have been in conflict in the Middle East for centuries because they both claim the same land in the Middle East. The reason for the hostilities between Palestine and Israel after World War II is that the United Nations relocated Jewish populations in formerly Palestine territory. This then created Israel. The UN did this because the Holocaust left many Jews with nowhere to go. The move resulted in a conflict between the Jews and Muslims that caused them to fight over land, and the problem still continues today. During the 9 days that this event took place, President of America at that time, Bill Clinton, along with Yasser Arafat and Benjamin Netanyahu, stayed on these grounds. Arafat was the chairman of Palestine. Netanyahu was Israel's prime minister. The American delegation stayed right over there. Over in the Houghton House was where the Palestinians stayed. Nearby at the River House was where the Israelis were located. When President Clinton wanted to talk to just Arafat or Netanyahu one-on-one, he would go to where each was located. But if they were all meeting together, they would meet right here at Wye Woods. This way, the peace talks were always on neutral territory. It is important to know that the Muslims and Jews have been fighting for centuries. Not surprisingly, that caused there to be a lot of tension during the peace talks here at the Wye Institute. The process was supposed to take just 4 days. It looked like the Wye River Memorandum would be signed in the allotted time for the first few days, but then, seemingly overnight, all progress stalled. This caused the talks to go on for 9 days instead. The peace talks were so hard that at one time, President Clinton, Vice President Al Gore, and Secretary of State Madeleine Albright all had to be there because of how tough it was to reach an agreement. Having the President, Vice President, and Secretary of State all in one place is something that rarely happens because of security concerns and because of numerous other obligations. That unusual circumstance shows just how important this was to the Americans. As you can imagine, security at the Aspen Institute was very high since 3 very important world leaders were here for the Wye River Peace Talks. All windows were outfitted with bulletproof glass. In order to get into the Aspen Institute, first you had to let dogs sniff your car for bombs. After that, you drove to a security tent where you had to go through a metal detector and get on a bus going to the house you were assigned. Once there, you had to go through another metal detector. There were also Navy SEALs in the Wye River, which you see right behind me. Policemen also liked to drop by when they were in the area and wanted to have dinner. but they were there as additional security precautions. Even after all this, the on-site security had to deal with multiple bomb threats. In the end, though, everyone was safe and the peace treaty was signed. Because this was a confidential process, no one really knows specifically what happened when Clinton, Arafat, and Netanyahu were discussing and signing the peace treaty, except for those three world leaders and their advisors. One thing we do know is that the treaty isn't holding its purpose very well, based on the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East. The Wye River Memorandum was very important because it tried to make the world a little safer and a little bit more peaceful, even if for only a little while. In the future, though, we will probably have to go through a similar process, again because of how deep the conflict runs, between those two countries, religions, the Middle East population, and even the world. And in spite of many attempts to end the fighting and find peace. Even though this treaty was very serious and very important, it was also fun for the people who were there. Bonnie Messick said, "I will never forget those few days when I interviewed her." Bonnie is the conference director here, so she knows a lot of stories. One of the stories she told me was that everyone wanted a picture with Buddy, Clinton's dog. Another story was that during these conferences, the kitchen staff was making really fancy meals for everyone. But one day, the president walked in the kitchen and requested that they have fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and gravy. The kitchen staff found that very funny, but they made the meal happen and it was a hit. Another interesting fact Bonnie had shared is that they held the Wye River peace talks in the dining room, and everyone there would eat in the conference room. This was because all the world leaders needed an identical seat, and all of their advisors needed identical chairs too. The dining room was much better for that. The participants also had a better view of the scenic Wye River from the dining room. From what Bonnie told me, Arafat was a very interesting man. She told me that he would try to get a picture with whoever he could, and he was always smiling. She also stated that he enjoyed speeding around on trails that run through the grounds in a golf cart. Bonnie told me that during the peace talks, Netanyahu had his 49th birthday. To celebrate, him and his wife walked along the river. I think that successfully signing the Wye River Memorandum was a pretty good birthday present, don't you? I think that today we found out that even in the most tense of times, fun can still be had and work can still be done to solve problems and seek world peace. Come back tomorrow to learn about a devastating hurricane that hit the Gulf of Mexico in 2005. This is Quinn McInnes signing off for WQNM Morning News. Because they both claim the same land in the Middle East. Science! World!